Hello and welcome to episode 288 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm good, Andy. I'm in a positive mood because normally when we talk, we have negative moods surrounding football. But this week, well, Spurs could be making a new signing as I make this, which could be interesting. So I'm not going to go any more on football or anything like that. But for once, I might have a positive vibe from my football club, which has obviously been good news. But aside from that, no, it's been a really good week. The Money to the Masses team is looking to ever expand, which is, there'll be more on that I'll be able to tell people in a future episode. So that's really positive. And we've had some great reviews, actually, which I think you're going to read out one of them in a second. So please do send in your reviews for the podcast. We like to receive them. We often deem them mug-worthy. Just a hint there. If you do leave a review, let us know. And it's really good for our podcast and be able to push it up those iTunes charts. So yeah, it's been great to read a few of those this week as well.
Yeah, and on that, I will read out one of the reviews that we've received from Rossi8944. And they said, having previously used an advisor for my SIP and ISA, I was reluctant to part with more cash. I found this podcast via a Google search when trying to learn about investing with the aim of setting up an ISA for my 1-year-old daughter. There were others I started listening to, but after a few weeks, I ditched the others and was left with Money to the Masses and This Is Money. Most people aren't George Soros, and having these guys explain investing and the economy with effortless simplicity to the average person is a breath of fresh air. Whilst I don't consider myself Soros after a couple of months of podcasts, I certainly have the foundations and confidence to explore further and make wiser, informed decisions about my money. Many thanks both.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with that because that's all we're trying to do is help people make informed decisions, gain confidence, explore money on their own if they want to, if they gain that confidence. So that's fantastic. We just helping people on their journey with money and their finances. So that's brilliant. So please do send them in because obviously, as you can hear, it gives Andy and I and the team a massive boost to read them. And we do read them all. So moving on with what's on this week's podcast. Having mentioned the team there, Lauren is making an appearance, her second appearance on the podcast, which is exciting because this week I started to do something in particular with my money, which I would explain in more detail on the piece, but around money roundup. So when you spend money on your finances and you get various apps and banks that can cleverly round up the change to build a pot of money in a savings account for you, which you could use that for an emergency fund, a way of building one, or to save for Christmas or whatever it is. And I've reintroduced that into my own finances because I think it's a fantastic way to start to save money. And even if you do save money, but to save extra money without realizing. But having said that, it's actually a more nuanced part of finances than I had realized because they all operate in slightly different ways. So I worked out that different people would like different versions of the roundup because they all seem to do it differently. So we go into that in detail to encourage and motivate people to maybe start using these in their own finances. I also want to talk about child trust funds. A lot of child trust funds are actually maturing. So the first set are maturing because they were launched 18 years ago. I want to chat about that, but also for people who have children, have child trust funds that exist. I'm one of those people, or I should say was one of those people. I want to quickly round up what they might want to do with their child trust fund. And finally, I want to talk about Google and the adverts that appear above search results. Some people might not realize they're adverts, but there is an issue that Which has actually exposed. And I want to show some of the scams that are operating in that section of your search results that you need to be aware of.
Excellent stuff. That sounds good. So what are we going to start with on this week's pod?
So I want to start with the savings roundup piece. And people who've listened to this podcast will have heard me in the past talk about savings roundup, and we don't go into detail on it. We end up saying that there are services such as Monzo and Starling and other banks that we're going to come on to in this piece on the podcast, and we talk about that how you can use them to help you start saving. So we've done a number of pieces in the past where we've talked about becoming millionaires or helping people using tricks to start saving, whether it's do you remember we did the 365-day challenge, those sorts of things. But obviously on the money challenge piece, we touched upon roundups, but I wanted to do a piece specifically on them because this week I decided to engage with a money roundup on my own finances. I've always wanted to do it, and I used to do it with Lloyds many years ago when I used to bank with them. And of course, as time's gone on, that system has now been introduced by other banks and apps, which we're going to bring Lauren back on the podcast and she's going to talk about. But roundups are a brilliant way for people to start saving money and put money aside. It could be whether you want to do it for Christmas, you want to start investing, or just building up an emergency fund. And it doesn't matter whether you are on a really tight budget or whether you have plenty of money and you just want to be able to take some of the money you're not using and have left over and almost build up a piggy bank like we used to in a previous podcast. Andy and I, we joked, didn't we, about the whiskey bottles. Our parents seemed to have the giant whiskey bottles on our stairwell where they were filling it up with 2p coins.
Yeah, and I talked to my dad recently and he still has one of those whiskey jars in a cupboard upstairs. I don't think he uses it anymore, but it's still there just from memories, I think.
You should get a photo and share it on socials with to show people who don't know what they look like. Yeah. And savings roundups work brilliantly. But of course, like I said, this week I went and decided that, obviously I sort out lots of stuff in my finances, and you'd probably expect that to be the case given that I run this podcast. But I thought, look, I do like the roundups. I haven't done it for years. And now there are so many services out there. Which one should I look at and use? And of course, there are lots of different banks that use it, and is it worth opening up a bank account with them? But then I realised there were some nuances to them. And what we want to do today is we're going to bring Lauren back on the podcast, and she's going to quickly run through the apps and services out there that do the roundup, because even if your bank or building society doesn't have a roundup feature on it, there are services out there that you can use in conjunction with your existing bank or building society to still be able to do roundups. And so we're going to run through who does it, but we're going to make it specific to people, because actually we've worked out that Lauren, Andy and myself deal with our money in different ways. Money is idiosyncratic. It is very personal. And of course, I don't get on with some of these roundup systems that Lauren likes and Andy likes, for example, or the way my finances are. They just wouldn't work. So what we want to do is allow people to say, look, I'm a bit like Damien, or I'm more like Lauren, or I'm more like Andy. And they might decide that there is a roundup system out there that they might want to start to use if they want to try and build a buffer. So it's just to inspire people to start that savings journey, and then they may progress to actually saving more deliberately with larger amounts going forward. So I want to bring Lauren back on the podcast. So Lauren's been waiting patiently in the background. Welcome back, Lauren.
Thanks for having me on the podcast to share my expertise around money apps and banking apps. I feel like that's all I do at the moment, is just look at the different banking apps and tell everyone how much I like each one. Yeah,
Lauren is our expert. That's why we got her on, because she spends a lot of time doing all the banking apps, various other parts, but particularly the apps that millennials like. I don't like using that term millennials, but because Lauren hosts our Millennial Money show and does it every week, don't forget to check out Millennial Money, actually, because we haven't mentioned it for a while. Lauren does it every week, does a bit about budgeting or whatever it is. What's this week's show on, actually, Lauren? We'll promote it. What is it?
This week's Millennial Money is actually on the different types of credit cards available and the uses of each one, really.
Good. So let's crack on with the roundup. So give me a rundown on the companies, banks or whatever out there that have roundup features that people can use.
So there are a few app-only banks out there that do the roundup features. So as you mentioned previously, Monzo does roundups, Starling Bank does roundups, Revolut actually also does roundups, and Tandem. There are two high street banks that still offer a roundup feature, and they call it Save the Change, and that's Lloyds and TSB. But the app-only banks, they allow you to round up your spare change as you go about spending each month. So there's also some other apps out there that allow you to not only round up your spending, but also they use algorithms and artificial intelligence to look at your spending and to save money automatically for you. And if you can't afford to save money one week, they won't put any money away for you. They basically look at your spending, and if you spend more one month, you might be able to save less, but if you spend less, you might be able to save more. So it's personalized to your spending each month. And those apps that do that are called Plum, Chip and Clio.
So to sum that up then, there are banks that do it, because I think Halifax do it as well, because they're part of the Lloyds group, that will do the Save the Change. There are some apps out there that allow you to do it, app-only banks like Monzo and Starling. But of course, this is rounding money up. But there is another set of apps out there that do like you say, AI that aren't rounding things up, but they're being clever, trying to work out how much you can afford to put aside as you go along, which is something slightly different, actually, which we'll mention later on. But there are also apps that just work in conjunction with your existing bank if you don't bank with somebody like Monzo or Starling, aren't there?
Yeah, so Moneybox allows you to round up into a savings account. So if you sign up to Moneybox and open a savings account with them, they have two at the moment. They've got a 45-day or a 95-day notice account. You can connect more than one bank account and a credit card to your Moneybox account, and you can then select to round up your transactions. So you go about your daily business and spend on your different cards, your credit cards, or your bank account, and Moneybox will then round up those transactions. And each week, once a week, it will transfer automatically via direct debit a sum of money over into your account, and that is all of your roundups combined, which it will save for you. So Moneybox is really good in the sense that you can connect more than one account, so you can round up your transactions from multiple accounts. But the difference is it takes out a direct debit after you have spent the money, whereas the app only bank accounts, it only does the roundups from the app only bank. So for example, it will only round up transactions from your Monzo or your Starling account.
So already you can see there are nuances, because what we're going to do in a second is go through and just highlight how where I use my money is different to Lauren and Andy. One thing to add on Moneybox actually is that they allow you to round money up into investments as well, so pensions, stocks and shares at ISAs, but there is a charge on those. There's a monthly charge that I think is actually expensive, so I don't really like that part of what they do. But their offerings in terms of savings accounts, they have a lifetime ISA that goes into cash as well. It's pretty good because there's not a monthly fee. The monthly fee works out to be, if you're only saving change, quite a lot of money. So they're a different option. So if I bring Andy in now, because funny enough, we all use different roundup features, different banks. So, I mean, Lauren, you generally work towards a budget, don't you? So you've got your budgets that you use monthly that will total your income, isn't it? That's how, when we talked about in the office, that's how you run your money, isn't it? When you're saving for a house.
Yeah, so each month when I get paid my salary, every penny in my monthly salary is accounted for. So when I get paid my salary, I then work it out into sub budgets, if you like, and I will account for my bills and then going out with my friends. So every single penny has a place to be each month in my account.
So that is, I mean, Lauren is brilliant at budgeting, and we learned so much in the office about how she does it, and it's been really popular on the Millennial Money series. But I think a lot of people are like Lauren, who are trying to keep to budgets and then trying to save money, additional money on the side, which is why the roundups can work. Andy, you're slightly different, aren't you?
Yes, so I work slightly differently to Lauren. I've got a bit of a buffer in my current account, and that can help to account for any ups and downs in terms of expenditure here and there. So I have broader budgets, and I use, funnily enough, roundup features to be the way I save. We'll get into the detail on how each one works later, but basically I use Starling because Starling works for me, because it works in a particular way in how it adds the roundups from your account. So for me, although I have broad budgets, I'll have X amount for food shopping, X amount for the mortgage. I will then be able to move over chunks into savings here and there, and the roundups serve as a bit of a Brucey bonus for me, because really I'm just keeping an eye on the total net amount that's in my bank account, and that can change month by month depending on how the budgets are doing.
Yeah, so taking Andy, there'll be a lot of people like Andy who are looking rough budgets, but also looking, if you were to go to a cash machine, see what the amount that comes on the screen. There are a lot of people who live like that, and I mean I definitely used to. See, I'm slightly different to both Andy and Lauren. I'm more down the world where I live on a credit card. So what happens is I will spend all my money in a month on a credit card, and at the end of the month clear that credit card. So when I am paid, I don't use my current account to spend money other than my bills that are coming out. So I end up therefore clearing the credit card each month. So I don't necessarily collect points or air miles, but I could by doing it that way, just to get cash back on credit card incentives by using a credit card to spend and live on, and then just clearing it at the end of the month. But of course my problem therefore is savings roundups don't work for me because I don't use my current account. So even if I had a current account that was with, say, Starling, I wouldn't be spending any money on it, and I wouldn't be rounding up anything really, or anything worthwhile. So going back to Lauren, you use Monzo, don't you?
Yeah, so I use Monzo for my spending account. I budget myself a certain amount of money each month, and that is what I can use, if I'm going to the supermarket at lunch to buy myself some lunch. And that's when I use the spare change roundups. and you can round it up to the nearest pound with Monzo. Funnily enough, for this piece, I actually went back through my Monzo account and I thought, oh, I'm quite interested now to see how much I could save. And over a period of a few months, I've saved £25.26. So with Monzo, on the rounding up to the nearest pound, on a basic Monzo account, you can only do that to the nearest pound. But you do have the ability on a Monzo Plus account, which you have to pay £5 a month for, to either round it up 2 times, 5 times, or 10 times more.
So basically, you can then supercharge your roundups. But what's interesting is I'm the kind of guy, okay, when I sit there and have a roundup, let's say we go to Nando's and you spend £32.50, I would want my roundup to go to £33 and it come out of my food budget. But what I did realise is that a lot of the roundup systems don't do that. They suddenly say that, no, Damien, you took £32.50 on Nando's, and then there's a separate 50p charge somewhere, or it just gets mysteriously added to a pot. So from my understanding, Monzo does that. Your budget's low, and if you've got a eating out budget, then my example there, you would actually have the whole rounded up amount go out of your budget. So what you're doing is squeezing your roundups from your existing budgets, which go up to your total income, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So it does include that in your eaten out budget. So you won't exceed your budget by rounding up. Monzo is clever enough to be able to include that in your budget for you, so you don't go over that amount.
Which is brilliant, so therefore that puts people, if you're living to your budgets and you're trying to squeeze some money out of the money you're already spending to try and round up, then Monzo is pretty good. But of course, that's different to Starling, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, Starling works in a slightly different way. So Starling will still do the roundup for you, but when you click into that budget, let's use your example, £32.50 at Nando's. When you click on the budget, it will still say £32.50 in your Starling spending analysis, and the 50p will just magically appear in your pot wherever you've decided for it to go. So it's kind of like a stealth saving. So unless you keep your eye on it, you wouldn't necessarily know that it's going across. For me, it works again because I use broader budgets and I look at that headline number in my bank account and I don't really notice that 50p, 70p, 80p sliding across into the accounts. But for those who are budgeting tightly, like Lauren, for example, and who want to know where the total budget is going, it wouldn't really work for them.
So with Starling, that 50p that we mentioned, while it magically appears in savings, it does immediately come off your total balance in your account. So if you go up to the cash point, look at your balance, it will have taken account of the 50p that went into savings as well.
That's right. Yeah, the headline number you see at the cash point, if you like, is automatically altered to account for the roundups that are happening live. So when the roundups happen, they're happening separately, if you like. They're almost like a separate savings thing, and they're not going into your actual individual budgets like Monzo does it.
Yeah, so really, to sum up the difference between the two, if you spent £1,000 in a month and that was your total amount of money, just to keep nice round numbers, and you managed to save roundups of £5, under the Monzo route, you actually have only spent £995 and £5 would have gone into your savings, whereas under the Starling way, you would have spent £1,000 and an additional £5 would have gone into your roundup. So it's a slightly different way it works. And so for some people, it's just how they like to view these roundups and manage their money. But for me, what was interesting, when I looked at those, none of them worked for me because I don't want to bank with either bank particularly. And actually, I have lots of different accounts. And like I say, I live on a credit card. And I opened my eyes that Moneybox is the one that will allow you to link up any account, like Lauren explained earlier. So you could link up. It's basically a read-only function that allows a credit card. You could have multiple current accounts, whatever you want. And it analyzes your spending, just reads it, and then just does a manual calculation to say, oh, right, if you rounded those up on all of those accounts and credit cards, this is the number. Let's say it's £6.58 in a given week. And what you do is you link one current account, sign up a direct debit on one current account that you may not even have been spending on. It's not even being analysed by Moneybox. And then what Moneybox does is every week take out the agreed amount that you are going to round up as a direct debit. So all it's using is that read-only function to determine the direct debit amount each week it puts into savings. So it's slightly different, but from my point of view, it means that I can do roundups but not have to use a particular bank. It means that I can use credit cards to do the roundups. So the roundups are being deducted from my current account. The downside of this, of course, you can already see it, is that where I will pay off my credit card with my money that I have in my current account at the end of the month, I need to make sure that the amount that I'm saving via these roundups hasn't reduced my pot of money in my current account too much so that I can't actually pay my credit card bill off. So it works if you have a bigger buffer. But the positive is it's a much more manual process, or can be if you want it to be, with Moneybox. You can choose the transactions to round up, so you have more control over it. Now, all of these three things we've talked about are covered under the FSCS, which is why we've gravitated towards those, because the Financial Services Compensation Scheme covers your money if these institutions go bust, because obviously the Moneybox accounts are held with a separate bank and you do get some interest on it. I mean, it's not perfect, trust me. I don't think there's anything on Moneybox. I'm looking at it, whether I use it or not is to be determined, but I like the idea of it. You can also supercharge or boost your roll-ups. They can do double roll-ups on there, not as much as you can with Starling and Monzo. I mean, Starling, you can do even more and you don't have to pay for the account either. So that's quite interesting. So this piece, I just want to encourage people who are thinking about or wanting to save, trying to build emergency funds in this COVID era. There are ways to do it, but you might have to look at which one suits you best based upon how you run your money. If you're tight budgets and a tight income, then something like perhaps Monzo might suit. Obviously, you've got to look at these institutions yourself. I know Monzo had a lot of bad press of late, particularly regarding their results and the losses they've made. So you've got to make that decision yourself. I mean, Starling works slightly differently, as Andy has described. And of course, you've got Moneybox, which is kind of a catch-all. But again, it can mean that you've got to be a little bit more manual and a little bit more keep an eye on your money so you don't run out of money, because the money within your Moneybox account, which is, like I say, saved with a savings account elsewhere with another bank, that is on a 45-day notice. That's the smallest one they've got at the moment. So if you need that money back, you're stuck. Monzo and Starling, you can get the money back straight away. With Moneybox, you're going to have a 45-day notice period to be able to get the money back that you've been saving. So that's, again, something that's not great. So it's, again, going to suit people who are comfortable with putting money away. They've got big enough budgets and income to cover those eventualities that they may have where they need to get access to money. So this whole area is ever evolving. But it's also interesting, like Lauren mentioned earlier, that there are people who might not like this idea of rounding up and committing to it. But then there are those AI systems that are able to roll money across. They look at your spending, they see if you're on target and move money across. So they could be useful for some people. So Lauren, if you quickly round up those AI types and then a roundup, just give us a list of the other people out there.
Yeah, so there's 3 apps that use artificial intelligence to squirrel away some money each month for you to save. So Plum calculates an affordable amount to save using its algorithm. It puts money away for you every 4 to 5 days. Money's held as e-money, so there's no FSCS protection. You can get instant access within 24 hours. And if you want to still save once you're in your overdraft, you can choose to do that with Plum. Chip is the same. With Chip, there's also no FSCS protection. It has its own algorithm that it uses to put away money for you each month. You can have same day withdrawals if you withdraw your money before 5 p.m. Chip, however, does charge you £1 if it manages to save over £100 for you in a 28-day period. And this is actually increasing to £1.50 from the 3rd of October 2020. And you can have 1 free withdrawal every 28 days with Chip, but anything over that from the 3rd of October will be charged an extra 50p. Clio is another one. That one you can use with your Facebook Messenger, and it's more of a messaging service that you ask it to save money for you. That transfers money over every week, and it takes 4 days for the transfers to show and at least 4 days for the money to be withdrawn from your account. And that also uses its own algorithm to do so, and it is FCA regulated, but there's no FSCS protection. And finally, just to round up on those, Tandem, we didn't mention that earlier, but with Tandem, you can also round up your spending to the nearest pound, but you have to open a Tandem account and it will save your money into a Tandem easy access savings account where you can earn 0.5% interest.
Tell you what, Andy, I think we should have a section of Lauren periodically coming back on the podcast with all that stuff, because that was a hell of a lot of stuff she got through there very quickly, wasn't it? Which I'm quite impressed with.
It was impressive.
I was actually so conscious then to try and round that up and keep that quite succinct, but I've literally got a mind map in front of me with all of the features, with all of the apps, and I struggled to try and mention it all in such a short period of time.
Don't show them behind the curtain. You don't want to let them know how we do it. But yeah, that's brilliant. So Lauren's got a review of all those things. If you want to know more, then go and search on the Money to the Masses website.
Okay, so what are we going to go on to next?
All right, the Child Trust Fund piece that I wanted to do. So 10,000, well, it's more than that, it's tens of thousands of 18-year-olds will now be entitled to the sort of first round of maturing child trust funds that are out there. So if you recall, child trust funds were the sort of precursors that we had before things like junior ISAs. And when the government created them, so we're going back to 2002, they would give a £250 voucher basically to be put into one of these child trust funds. And so for people who were born between the 1st of September 2002 and the 31st of January 2011, then they were given this £250 voucher to put into a child trust fund of their choice. So it could be a cash child trust fund or a investment child trust fund. And so that is why the first batch of those have started to mature in this September. And by the maturing, I mean that the person's come of age, they are now 18, so they can now take control of that child trust fund. They therefore have choices of what they want to do with that money. There were other people who were born between the 1st of September 2009 and the 31st of July 2010, who actually got an additional top up. And that was usually to do with those from poorer families. So there was an additional £250. So that was a total of £500. So if you claimed the voucher, you could have set up a child trust fund. I did for one of my daughters. But if you didn't, then the government would actually set up one for you automatically in a stakeholder child trust fund. So that does mean that there's a whole batch of 18-year-olds out there who don't realise that there is a pot of money with their name on it out there. And that money could have grown perhaps substantially. You could argue it's probably going to be in the hundreds. I mean, I've seen some people say it could be in the thousands. That's very unlikely, to be honest with you. I think it's just being a slightly sensationalist. But if you are listening to this podcast, I know we do have some listeners who are younger, then if you turn 18 this year or in the coming years, you should go and look to see if you have a child trust fund set up in your name. And you can do that by going to gov.uk/child-trust-fund/find-a-trust-fund. And if you're over 16, you can go to the Share Foundation, which can also help you. Now, we'll put the links in the show notes for these. But even if you're not 18, it's worth asking your parents if you have a child trust fund. If you are in those age ranges with the dates I gave earlier from if you were born between. If you're 16 and over, you can actually take control and manage your child trust fund, so where it's actually invested. So you may want to do that because ultimately it's going to become your money. Now, when you're 18, you don't have to just take the money. A lot of people think that child trust funds will be cashed in, people will take the money and run and spend it on partying. But actually the evidence already suggesting that a lot of people are seeing this money and actually continuing to invest that money because they can move that money into an ISA. So it could be a cash ISA or stocks and shares ISA. But interestingly, which is another reason I wanted to highlight it, they can actually move it into a lifetime ISA. So we've dealt with lifetime ISAs in the past on the podcast, but they effectively are an ISA that's designed to help people save for a house or can be used for a pension. But it's really to save for to buy a house, and you get a nice Brucey bonus from the government in doing so, 25% bonus in fact. So if you're a teenager, then you may want to see if you've got a child trust fund that could be coming your way. Think about what you're going to do with it. Obviously, the Millionaire podcast I did recently is very appropriate because it included a section of what happened when people got to 18 about how they should keep investing that money. The other thing I just want to briefly touch upon is that obviously people who could be having maturing child trust funds or don't know, they should go and look for them or ask their parents if they can to find out how much is in there, and then they can manage it and decide what they're going to do. But if you're a parent and there are still child trust funds out there that your children have, then it's almost certain you're better off moving them elsewhere, because the problem with child trust funds, they're kind of a forgotten product. So a lot of them are savings products. They get really naff savings rates. If you move them to junior ISAs, it almost certainly won't cost anything. You'll be able to find better cash savings rates in junior ISAs because they're the product that obviously investment companies and banks and building societies are interested in. But also you can move them to junior ISAs that are stocks and shares ISAs, and there are much broader investment choices. So do go and look at our best junior ISA article that we've got on the website that explores all the different types of junior ISAs out there. Now, I know if you're going to transfer, not all providers actually accept transfers from child trust funds to junior ISAs. Nearly all do, but interestingly, Vanguard, which is one of the ones that I know a lot of people are quite interested in at the moment, they don't accept transfers from child trust funds to junior ISAs. They do accept transfers from junior ISAs to junior ISAs. So if you're that way inclined, perhaps there is a way of navigating via another provider, but it seems a lot of work to do it when particularly there are a lot of providers out there like Hargreaves, for example, who do junior ISAs and do accept transfers from child trust funds. So just a quick FYI for parents that may have child trust funds for their kids, for people who are teenagers who may be eligible or may have a child trust fund out there, just to go and do something about it, but also for people who may know somebody who might be having a child trust fund that they've lost touch with or didn't know about.
Excellent stuff. Moving on to Google. So you're going to do a piece covering Google Ads, and Which has done some research on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to dwell on the Which research. It's really a bit of an investigation that they've done, which it will feel kind of obvious to some people. But for a lot of people, you have to realise it's not obvious. So we have to explain how Google search works. So when you go online and you search for anything by going into Google, you get a whole range of results. And there's a whole batch of them that are called organic search results. So that means search results that are based upon people putting out great content on the internet. So Money to the Masses being a good example, and they will appear on that page or that first page. But there are hundreds of pages of results you can go through. Google obviously makes its money, a large part of it, from advertising. So people can pay to appear on that first page, and they pay an amount of money. So when you click on it, there's a pay per click, they call it. So every time you click on one of their adverts, they are charged. Well, Google, obviously, as you know, makes billions and billions of pounds a year from doing this. But what it does mean is you can pay to appear at the top of the search results. Now, as time's gone on, Google has changed the way that first page looks, and you will notice it from time to time. Oh, search results look a little bit different. And there have been people who've claimed that Google are going along the lines of trying to make the difference between the adverts, the appearance of the adverts that are given priority at the top, and the next set of organic search results that are there by merit. They're trying to make the difference more and more subtle. So people will go and click on the adverts because obviously it's in their interest to do so. But they're not allowed to be disingenuous or anything like that. But some people just might not realise, even though they are marked as adverts, that they are adverts. They just go on the first result because they're busy people and they click through. That is where the problem's occurring. So it means that there are genuine people advertising genuine services for anything out there and using adverts. There's nothing wrong with that. But what it does mean, there are fraudsters out there that are using the fact that they can pay to get the top of Google search results to manipulate people and scam them. So what I want to do is just highlight some of the scams. So, for example, if you put in best cash ISAs or something like that, you will see a whole host of organic results. You'll probably see us on there somewhere and be able to read things like from us or Money Saving Expert or whatever it is. But there are also adverts that appear up there, and they change all the time depending on what people have paid for. Now, Which have said that they've seen adverts up there for high risk investments. And some of those have been things like mini bonds. You would have seen in the news previously, they're a type of bond that were advertised to retail investors that are quite risky. And the FCA banned those types of adverts. So Google had to do something about those particular types of adverts. And now, ironically, the FCA are still having to try and stop them by advertising with Google in those top results to say don't click on adverts or issuing warnings about mini bonds and retail bonds, and they spent 180k in the first 3 months of this year to do so, which all seems very odd and ironic that the regulator is paying Google for adverts at the top of search results to warn about the problems of the adverts at the top of search results. It seems like one of those Inception films that goes on and you get a bit lost. But the point is, don't trust the adverts you see at the top of any search results, almost for anything, but particularly when it comes to a investment or a money-related search that you do. So don't click on any of those adverts, because the next thing that have been shown to be, not only are some of those things up there high-risk investments, some of them are scams, but some of them are also impersonating legitimate businesses. So Which found examples where they had impersonated banks. And so when people clicked through, they appeared on a website that looked genuine, but it was actually a fake website. And then they were engaging with this company, and it was actually a scam company, and they were defrauding them of money. It even got to the point where they were copying details of actual employees at some of these banks. So when one person then went on LinkedIn and thought, I'm going to check if this person is genuine that I'm dealing with here, it was a genuine person that at a bank, the bank didn't know about the scam either. So they were completely cloning the bank and some of the employees' names to make it genuine. So when people did research, so there are imposter banks on there. They are copying even employee details to convince people. And the other thing that's appearing up there is, let's say you've had an accident and you're thinking about, I want to claim with my insurer. So you're looking for the claims number for your particular insurer. There's been signs of scammers putting in fake numbers on there. So you might put in your insurer and the claims lines. You therefore see the top result, don't realise it's an advert, click on it, go through to a number, you call that number, and it's actually a different company that may be of a complete scam that defrauds you of money, or might be a third party that is actually offering you a service that you don't realise you can get for free. So you think you're going through to your insurer, but you're actually going through a claims company. So you have to be careful of that. And the other one, which I think is disgraceful, is the debt charity imposters. Now, there are people on there that are impersonating debt charity. So they are people who are basically generating leads for companies that they want to issue individual voluntary agreements that are obviously legally binding contracts, but they're doing it for companies who want to generate leads for companies that do that. So it's not in the person's best interest. They're trying to get through to, say, Step Change, who are a charity that can help people with lots of debt, but instead they're being taken advantage of by companies that are trying to make money out of people who've got debts, or some debt consolidators. So you have to be careful. Now, how do you avoid it? Yes, don't click on the adverts. Do go and check on organic results to find the companies that you're after, and then contact them that way before you go through to them on an advert. Make sure you're not clicking on an advert. When it comes to investments, you can check the FCA's register to see if there's any warnings on there for potential impersonators out there. So, for example, the one that I mentioned earlier about the bank that was impersonated, their entry on the FCA register had a warning next to it. But of course, that's not perfect, because unfortunately in the story I've just told, the person did check the FCA register and there was no warning on there when they checked. But days later, after they'd become a victim, an entry appeared on the FCA register that warned about these impersonators. So be vigilant is the message, and you have to treat Google and the way that the search results appear with a dose of caution, so you can try and limit the likelihood that you become a victim of fraud.
Okay, so that's us done this week. If you want to get in touch with Damien, you can do so. It's Damien at moneytothemasses.com. Twitter, it's at moneytothemasses with the number 2. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and don't forget we've got a YouTube channel as well. And as Damien said at the start of the podcast, please do write your reviews. It helps us to get to the top of the iTunes charts and the podcast players of your choice, and it means that we can help more people, which is what we love. Damien, we're done, aren't we?
Yeah, we're done. So until next time.
Until next time.